All right, it looks like we are live on the live stream. So I'm waiting for it to come up over here with the delay, and I have to mute it often. There we go, coming up. There we go. Got to mute it. That way we don't see it. Okay,
Your
here we
show
go.
will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome once again to another edition of the Real Interfaith Dialogue here on Blog Talk Radio and the Global Patriot Radio Network. And here on StreamYard, we're streaming, not StreamYarding, we're streaming to 3 different locations. 2 of them are on Facebook, which is the Cross and the Crescent discussion group and Radio Free Kaffirstan. And we are also live streaming over here to YouTube. And I see we have a whole bunch of people in chat already. Thank you, folks, over there in chat for coming this afternoon. We have a great topic this afternoon. Why? Because I picked it. I'm kidding. Normally, what I do is I ask people that are on the panel here, all 5 of them, we got 5 of us here, and I asked them, I said, hey, what do you guys want to do on Sunday? What do you guys want to do on Tuesday? And Chris Claus is normally, sounds great. Radical is usually something about doing commercials, and John wants to do something technical, and DL likes to plead the fifth quite a bit. So this week, I picked the topic, which is Mecca, or better yet, the absence of evidence for Mecca. And the reason why I did this is because recently I took a class that Jay Smith, our friend Jay Smith, had given at a university that I'll leave unnamed. And it was online, of course, because if you did it live, I guess you would have everybody and their brother out there protesting. But anyway, it was online, and it dealt with the beginnings of Islam. It dealt with the absence of evidence for Mecca. And a lot of the information that I'm going to be using and presenting here today is from Jay's slideshows, or one of his slideshows that he presented during the class. And I'll also mention that a lot of the information that Jay used is from our friend Dan Gibson, who we had on the show last fall. I think he was on. So a lot of this information has been brought up before on this show, been mentioned before, but I want to go ahead and just kind of do a formalized presentation of this. You know, why is this problematic for Islam? Let me go ahead and share my screen here. I'm not going to share the whole thing. Let me just do it this way. There we go. Nope, that's not it. That is, we'll just leave it at that. A lot of this is problematic for Islam itself, and here's why. If we look at the Psalm 1 or Psalm 11, verse 3, it says, the foundations are destroyed. What can the righteous do? And so my question would be, if the foundations are destroyed for a Muslim or for Mecca, what can a Muslim do? Because when we look at the historicity of Mecca, Islam itself is completely dependent upon 3 things. It's completely dependent upon Muhammad, it's completely dependent upon the Quran, and it's completely dependent upon Mecca. Now, you remove one of those 3 pillars, and everything else just falls like a house of cards. So this is why I'm saying, if we take a look at the evidence for the existence of Mecca in the 7th century, and you can demonstrate that it did not exist in the 7th century, think of what that would do to the faith of 1.6 billion Muslims across the globe. If you can show, and it reminds me of last year when Yasser Qadi and Mimi Hijab got together, and they had that holes in the narrative discussion, and how that shattered the faith of thousands of Muslims, because they can clearly see that the Quran has not indeed been perfectly preserved. Well, if you could take away one of the pillars of Islam, which is the existence of Mecca, because if you think of what Mecca is to a Muslim, Mecca is where is their Qibla. It's where they pray 5 times a day. It is where they make the Hajj. It is where Muhammad was born. It is all kinds of things to Muslims. And my goal is to point out that we don't have any evidence for it. If you look at the Bible and you make a comparison to the Quran and its references to geographic locations, which we're going to do here shortly, the differences are stark and startling. For an example, Jerusalem in the Bible is mentioned over 800 times in both the Old and the New Testament. Mecca in the Quran is mentioned one time. So that should give you some idea of the importance of, if you are going to say your capital city is Jerusalem. And then as a Muslim, you're going to change that to Mecca, but yet it's only mentioned one time in the Quran. That indeed has to be problematic. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these problems with Mecca. Now, number one, if we look at why do we do this historical critique, as I just mentioned, it strikes right at the very foundations of Islam. It strikes right at the very foundation of the Quran. It strikes right at the very foundation of Muhammad. The second thing I like about this is that it's neutral. Any idiot can use this information. It's just when you start stating facts, historical facts. This is why it's so easy to be a historian, is because history is deals a lot with historical facts. The second thing is you're not attacking anybody. Or third thing, I'm sorry, you're not attacking anybody. You are only pointing out what is there and what is not there. So you're not attacking Muslims. You can't be told it's hate speech. I mean, when you cite historical facts, there's really no way that could be hate speech. Now, I get it. You know, you could state or cite different ahadith and say, okay, well, since you're pointing out that Muhammad had sex with Aisha when she was 9 years old and he was 54, that's hate speech. Okay, I can understand your stance on that. But when you start talking about history and you start talking about geography, it's really not personal. And it doesn't make you an Islamophobe for citing facts. And it's easy to communicate, which makes it easy because it's very visual. And I have a lot of visuals for you today. And it answers a lot of the problems that we find within the Quran. That's my goal today, is to show you some of the problems that it has. Why Mecca is not the city as described in the Quran. So we're going to look at we're only going to look at 3 different areas. I don't want to get to debunking 7th century claims because that can be a long and drawn out process. But I do want to point out the first 3. So let's go ahead and look at the geographical problems. So if you look at the geographical problems in the Quran itself, and a lot of this information comes from, where'd it go? It comes from Dan Gibson's book, Quranic Geography, right here. And it points out that there's 2 regions that are in the Quran that are mentioned a total of, 47 times. Ad and Thalmud, which is 2 different peoples. Well, if you look where these locations are, they're 400 or 500 miles north of where Mecca is. So unless Muhammad was communicating with these people on a daily basis or interacting with these people on a daily basis, that in of itself should at least make it problematic for someone to believe that Mecca is the city that they're speaking of. It talks about that there was dwellings that were cut in the sides of the mountain. There's no dwellings cut in the side of the mountains down in Mecca. It talks about Midian, which is further north, 600 miles north. And it also says that these 3 civilizations are in northern Arabia. So if you're 600 miles too far north for these 3 civilizations that are mentioned in the Quran, where would that place Mecca? Well, that would place Mecca out of place because Mecca is way too far south. Now let's look at some of the comparisons here for where geographical locations are made. In the Quran, you have 65 geographical references to different places. It only mentions 9 places total, which is pretty let me add this. Sorry, which is pretty amazing if you think about it. If you're only mentioning 9 different places in a book, that tells me that there's something wrong with the book, especially if this is supposed to be the last testament of God. And these places are 600 miles too far north, and they're all in the wrong place. Now, you compare that to the Gospel of Luke. If you look at the Gospel of Luke, there's 110, just in the Gospel of Luke alone. There's 110 different references, 31 different places are mentioned, and they're all at the right place and at the right time. So when we look at the Gospel of Luke, and we can demonstrate using geography, using archaeology, that these places existed in the first century. They existed at the time of the events that the Gospel pretends to describe. Then it puts them at the right place and at the right time, whereas in the Quran, it does not. Let's compare that to the other 3 Gospels. The Gospel of Matthew has 108 geographical references. Now remember, the Quran only has 65. Matthew has 108, Mark has 79, and the Gospel of John even has more than the Quran, has 69. So all 4 of the Gospels have more references to geographic locations than the Quran itself. You have 31 locations in Matthew, you have 26 locations in Mark, and you have 14 locations named in the Gospel of John, where in the Quran you only have 9. So all of the Gospels name these locations. Now here is a map of where Mecca is located. Is this it? Yes. So if you look right here, here's Mecca. And up here is where you would find Petra, right up here in Jordan. So when we talk about the Nabateans, Ad and Thalmud, this is the location that they're talking about. So the distance from here to here is over 600 miles. That should be very problematic. Now, notice also the geography here. You have the Red Sea runs up the entire west coast of Saudi Arabia today, and then the Gulf of Aqaba angles up to where it is in the southern part of the Negev Desert of Israel, also known as Beersheba. So let's proceed from there. Okay, so here is a map, a facsimile of a map from the 7th century at the time of Muhammad, at the time that Mecca is supposed to exist. Notice the trade routes. The green is the trade routes, the way people would trade overland, on the sea, etc. What is missing from there? What city is missing? I'll give you one guess. It begins with M and ends with Eka. Very good, class. You're all over it. Mecca is missing. What about this one right here? Here we have another facsimile. What is missing? Again, it's showing trade routes. There is no Mecca. There is nothing there. Here is a 6th century map. Now, the 6th century map is at the time when Muhammad's born, 572. He lives in up to 632, I think, is the year that he died. Makes Hijra, at 623. Starts receiving revelations around 610. Makes Hijra around 623. And notice what's not on the map. There's no Mecca on this map. If Mecca was supposed to be the mother of all cities, like it was supposed to be, like it's described in the Quran. Send me an email. Why Hafswash? Not same. It's Dave. Send me an email and I'll send you the link. So if you look, there's no mention of Mecca here either. If you look on the 7th century map, there's no Mecca. These maps, folks, and look how detailed this map is. I mean, it gives hundreds of cities are located on here, but there's no Mecca. If Mecca is supposed to be the place where supposed to be the mother of all cities, is supposed to be a prominent place on a trading route, you would expect to find it. But it's not there. And this is where we say there's no evidence at all on any of these maps, that Mecca exists. It's just not there. Now let's look at some of the problems with Mecca itself. Let me check my email, see if I got one. Don't have it it. Okay, email Eric Thekifer@gmail.com. Eric, I'm sorry, folks. When I start I cannot multitask. I have kind of a track mind. It's not good. There we go. Oh, well, I just posted it. Okay. Where'd it go? Okay, so if we look at the Mediterranean world at the time of Mecca.
Wait, you silly kafir. We only accept Islamic maps. Are these Islamic maps? Do you have a chain of transmission for these Islamic maps? If you don't have an isnad, then we reject this. Sorry, just playing the Muslim.
Thank you, Rad. I appreciate you. You do a good job of that. A little too good, if you ask me.
I'm actually really secretly undercover Muslim. I'm taking down names, and we're turning you all into ISIS. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, let's look at some of the problems with Mecca. The sanctuary appointed for mankind is at Mecca. Is that supposed to be Mecca? And John did a good job for us a number of weeks ago, showing, or was it Adam? One of you two guys got on here and showed us how you can change a B to an M by just inserting a circle at the corner of the letter.
Yeah, so Mecca and Mecca. Yeah, true. Yes. In Arabic, just half circle, not complete circle. From Mecca to Mecca.
Just by inserting this. I mean, you don't have to change anything. You just insert this little squiggly, this little round circle on the corner of that letter. It changes the word, and it moves it from Mecca, which is the house, which is the Valley of Weeping.
And remember yesterday, I there was like I gave you like an article in Saudi writers. They are trying to change Mecca because Mecca has nothing in history. Doesn't appear in history in this area. Only Mecca.
Well, we could about imagine why the Saudis want to change it too.
Yeah.
Because how much money do they make every year off the Hajj? I mean, that's got to be a ton of money going into that economy there. That's just me being simple. Okay, it's described as the mother of all settlements, as I mentioned before. It's where Adam and Eve were supposedly thrown down from heaven onto the earth. If you follow the Quran, and this is, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but the Quran has Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden existing in heaven. And then when Adam and Eve sinned, God threw them down to the earth. And when he threw them down to the earth, the place that they went was Mecca. It's supposed to be where Abraham lived in 1900. Now, how Abraham got 600 miles south really is, I mean, maybe he got on a boat. We don't know. But if this is supposed to be where he sacrificed Ishmael, he would have been on a very long journey just to do that. And it just does not make any sense to try to insert that story into the biblical narrative. It's where Muhammad was born and lived, and it became the center for the Qibla. That sounds wrong. Is that right? It became the center for the Qibla. I thought it was like 628 or 627. Does anybody know if I'm right or wrong on that? Maybe somebody can fact check that for me. It just seems like it was later during Muhammad's ministry, prophethood, that he changed the Qibla from Jerusalem to...
According to Quran, it should be changed at days of Muhammad from Jerusalem to Mecca. But historically, we saw the work of Dan Gibson is not showing that. It was many years later.
Okay, so do you know the year that was the Qibla was supposed to be changed from?
No, I don't know exactly.
Okay, maybe somebody.
I can search and check.
Okay, thanks. All right, and what else do we know? And plus, there's only one mention of the word, we only have one mention of Mecca by name in the Quran, where in the Bible we have Jerusalem mentioned over 700 times. So this, or 800 times. That's very problematic. If you were going to say that this is supposed to be the city that is so important to God, to where he would send Adam and Eve down from heaven, if this is the city that is supposed to be the mother of all settlements, if this is the city where Abraham was, if this is the city where God's last prophet for mankind lived and was born, if this is supposed to be the city that you're supposed to pray to, why is it only mentioned one time in the Quran? Why is that? That's very problematic. But it gets worse. Let's just put it that way. Okay, now there is little vegetation in Mecca. If you look in Mecca today, I have this. We'll just go through this. Okay, here's some of the descriptions that we have in a hadith and also in the seerah of Muhammad. It's supposed to be in a valley, a parallel valley. It's supposed to have a stream going through it. It's supposed to be outside is the ruins. Then there's supposed to be a pillar of salt there. Oopsie. This is what happens when I let people in. It switches my screen on me. Sorry about that. What do we got here? We got a couple people watching on Facebook. Very good. All right. Where were we? And it has fields. Now that's important. If you have fields, that means that you're growing stuff. Okay, we'll get to that. Hold on. It has trees and grass and fruit and clay and loam, meaning that it is tillable ground, is how this is described by Al-Tabari. Al-Bukhari says it has grapes in it. Al-Bukhari says it has grass in it. So there's all kinds of extra Quranic references to Mecca that throw everything off. If you look at Surah 6, 16, and 80, it says it has olive trees. That is very problematic because there is no way an olive tree can grow in Mecca. If you look at the amount of rainfall they get like 2 inches of rain a year. Olive trees are indigenous to the Mediterranean world, much further north where you would have them in what is now Israel, or you would have them in where the Nabateans were. In Jordan today, you would have olive trees, but you do not have olive trees in Mecca. So if you don't have olive trees in Mecca, there's no trace of olive trees in Mecca, meaning we don't find any seeds there. We don't find any spores there. We don't find anything in that hard, rocky soil, if you want to call it that, sand, that indicates that any olive trees ever were grown there or ever could have grown there. So why is the Quran describing that Mecca has olive trees in it? That's very puzzling. It has mountains overlooking the Kaaba. Mountains, not hills, mountains. Now, I guess if you're here in Iowa, maybe mountains would be, it doesn't have to be very high in order to be a mountain here in Iowa. So I guess a mountain would be a relative. I'll cut them some slack on that one. But if you look at Mecca today, it's not in the valley and it does not have any of those items listed above. This is a picture of Mecca today. I'm trying to look at the water that runs right down between it. Oh, well, they built over the top of everything. So I guess we'll never know about that. When we look at the earliest literary references to Mecca, the earliest one isn't until 741 AD. So let's just think about this just for a second here. Number one, the geography. When we look at the geography of Mecca and we look at the things that are supposed to exist there, grass, trees, soil, tillable soil, olive trees, those things that are supposed to be there, they're not there. Number two, if you look at the maps, the maps that existed at that time, Mecca is not mentioned. It's not mentioned on any maps. And then number three, we don't have any mentions in any type of literature of Mecca until 741 AD. This is over 100 years after the death of Muhammad, when Muhammad died in 632. So this is, thank you, Gedalia. She beating me to it. Way to go. This is 109 years before it's even mentioned. Rob, quit, or who is this? White House. No. Did you send me an email? Hold on. Oops. Let me check. Hand account. Hops. Okay. Let me pull the. the StreamYard link here.
Can I
Share.
ask a question real quick? If it's all right.
Who's talking? Is that you, Isa?
It's me.
Okay, go ahead. What's up?
It's more of like a follow-up question to what you were stating. If what would be enough evidence to prove that Mecca would be Mecca? What would you need to see to prove that? Like, so you were talking about the map, you were talking about kinds of other foods. What, like, if you were to make a checklist, what other kinds of things would you need for you to be persuaded that Mecca would equal Mecca?
What would persuade me that what is not Mecca?
That Mecca would be Mecca, like, because that's what Muslims are arguing, that Mecca is Mecca, right? So what would you need to see to believe the Muslim claim?
Well, something we call evidence, archaeological evidence for one, consistency in the geographical references, a map showing Mecca to exist in the whole thing is not disproving that Mecca exists. The whole purpose of this is to show that Mecca did not exist in the 7th century. So when you don't have any type of references to it in literature, if you don't have any references to it in maps, if you don't have the Quran and also the extra Quranic literature, which is the Hadith, the Sirah, whatever, are inconsistent about what should be in Mecca, that indicates to me that they have the wrong city. Now, what would, and also something archaeological, show me something there that shows that the city existed prior to the 7th century. On top of that, I would also ask for, if this was supposed to be the place of the Hijra, where everybody made, or not Hijra, the Hajj, where everybody made a pilgrimage to it for all these years, because everybody was a Muslim, I guess. You would have some type of inscriptions on rocks surrounding the area from that time period that would indicate that people are on their way there, or this is the city that they need to go to make this pilgrimage. The problem is that there is, it's just dead silence. When we look at any mentions in the Bible for locations in the Bible, we don't have to go to the Bible to look for these references. We can demonstrate the majority of the places that are talked about in the Bible, spoken of in the Bible. We can demonstrate them through the use of archaeology. We can demonstrate those through extra biblical sources, and we do. The thing with the Quran is that in order to demonstrate that Mecca existed in the 7th century, you have to go to only Islamic sources, Hadith, the Sirah, or even Tafsir. That's it. Anything else? Not there. Does that make sense, Isa?
It does.
Or okay, let me ask you this, because you always ask great questions. Am I being too critical? Am I being hypercritical here, in your opinion?
So I want to make sure I rephrase. I'm going to rephrase back to you what I think I'm hearing you say, just to make sure I understand. So you're saying not only are the position that you take, you don't believe Mecca is even a historical city, because that's like, for Muslims, that's a big deal. They believe that Abraham and Ishmael went to Mecca, right? That's the argument. That's how old Mecca is. It's supposed to be that ancient, right? So if it's correct, and the panelists here. So I'm just making sure I'm clarifying and I understand everything correctly. You're saying that's not even true. And not only is that not true, what's not true also is that that Mecca wasn't even a prominent city at all until the 7th century. That's when, or it's maybe even after the 7th century. Is that correct? Am I understanding correctly or not?
Well, I don't think it was a prominent city. I mean, if the first mention we have of Mecca in any type of literature is 741, outside of Islamic sources.
8th century. You're saying 8th century.
8th century, right? 8th century is the earliest mention that we have of Mecca. Most certainly, we do not have anything there that would date it clear back to Abraham. Abraham's 1900 BC, for crying out loud. There's nothing that even comes close to that. So when you look at, the source for biblical stories, the majority of the stories that we have in the Bible can and are supported by extra biblical evidence. But with Mecca, there's nothing there. It's the absence of evidence of and I'm not just saying the absence of evidence, the entire history of it prior to the 7th century is silent. There's nothing there. And I want to show you a couple other things before we get going any further down that road, if you don't mind. Let's go ahead and finish this slideshow up. I don't have very many more to go. As I mentioned, the earliest maps don't show Mecca until 900 AD. Oops. It'd be helpful if I put the slideshow back up there, wouldn't it? Okay, so the earliest maps don't show Mecca until 900 AD. It's not mentioned in any extant writings until 741. And if you look at Patricia Corona, she said that the trading documents referred to the towns of Taif, which is south of Mecca, Yathrib, and Khaybar, but never Mecca. It never mentions Mecca as a city. Why'd that go off there? I don't know why that goes off there. If you look at Mecca today, this is what Mecca looks like today. It has the world's 4th highest building in it. If you look at this huge tower rising up out of the desert there in the Saudi Arabian desert, I mean, the thing is absolutely huge, and it has this clock face on it that is 45 feet wide. It's some people, this is what Jay Smith thinks, is that they're trying to change it from Greenwich Mean Time, which is time in London, to Mecca Mean Time. Just want the whole, just like the you have AH after Hijra instead of AD, it's after Hijra. Instead of Anno Domini, it's AH. They want to change that also, which I don't think that's ever going to catch on, but then you never know. But it most definitely won't catch on after this slideshow. If you look at Mecca today, here's the Kaaba right here, this itty bitty dot right here, and look at all these proposed drawings that they're proposed that they want to build. But if you look at it, they've made a really good start. I think there's 62 skyscrapers that they're building there. It's just absolutely huge. But when you look at these skyscrapers, and this is the point that I'm making, when you go to build, like let's say in the year, I think it was 1996, they had the Olympics in Greece. I may be wrong on, I'm willing to be wrong on that. But I believe they had the Summer Olympics in Greece. And in order to prepare for the Summer Olympics, Greece had to go through this huge building process. When I talk about a huge building process, if you're going to have the Olympics in your city, you have to go through a lot of building. You have to do a lot of digging. And the problem with that, with digging in Greece, is every time you put a shovel in the ground, you're digging something up that has some type of archaeological value. It got to the point where they're digging up so many artifacts that they're making display cases in the subways for people to look at. I mean, I thought that was, really interesting and cool to see. But the fact is that since the city was so old, Athens is such an old city, dating clear back to the 5th, 6th century BC, it's natural that you're going to be digging stuff up. But if this city is supposed to date back to 1900 BC, when Abraham lived, if it's supposed to, even let's say it's supposed to date back to the 7th century AD, you would expect to have some type of archaeological evidence being produced that would be dug up when you undergo building projects like this, especially around the Kaaba. If the Kaaba was supposed to be this place that people were making pilgrimages to, you would expect to have some type of archaeological evidence for it. The problem is that there is none. And since there isn't any archaeological evidence to support a 7th century Mecca, what better way could there be to cover that up than to actually cover it up, cement over it, build all these things around it, and just pretend like it's there, but I'm sorry, we just we don't venerate objects, so we're gonna build these buildings over it. So the bottom line is that when you look at the evidence against the existence of Mecca prior to the 7th century, it's overwhelming, the evidence against it. If you were going to present evidence for Mecca existing in the 7th century AD and prior to that, I would really like to see it. Okay. Who's got a question? Who's got something to interject here? Somebody has to have something to say because I just ran out of material.
Well, I just like to add a few times to the kufars in the room. Clearly, Mecca is the holy city from God because look at how lavish it is. Okay? Clearly, I mean, it was unhuman. Well, the Kaaba, for instance, was just a pile of unhewn stones without a roof. You know? Where dogs and other animals would go in to seek shelter and defecate, okay? And the pagans would put up their various representations of their deity. So clearly, this is clearly a sign that it is from the true Allah, right? Because, that's what you would want,
Have faith. Just have a little faith, and
exactly. But look at Mecca now. You've got Big Ben clock there now. You got luxurious hotels, and you worry pilgrims. Okay, you don't have to do all the nonsense that they out in the open. I mean, they actually have walkways now. Okay, I don't know if you know this, but to run, okay, so there's a bunch of different things. It depends what package you book, okay? This is before COVID, don't get me wrong. But you could book the package where you don't even set foot outside into the Arab sun, okay? Because you are in constant air condition. Either in a bus, and I believe they have like they have in Las Vegas, where they have like the air-conditioned streets now. You know what I mean? Where you walk down, what do you call it? The boulevard in Las Vegas, where they got the sky thing over you, the tent and everything. And it's all air conditioned. It's just like you walked outside of the hotel into, well, another hotel. You know what I mean? But yeah, so you don't have to suffer all that when you go on the Hijra. You don't when you're running in. There's no running in between the two little hills. They're actually not hills. I don't think. I think they're just like piles of rocks, aren't they? The hills of what is it?
Safa Marwa. They're nothing but hills. They're not mountains as you would expect to find.
Right. Well, all that's air conditioned. Yeah, all that's air conditioned. And hey, this is a bonus for you men. You ain't wearing no underwear, and neither are the women. So when you get compressed, I'm just saying, you get some little going on there.
Somebody was having a discussion about that. I don't know on whose show it was, or if I was listening to somebody's podcast where they were talking about how many attacks there are, sexual assaults that there are. In these in during the Hajj, which is to me it's just completely disgusting to think that would even be a concern. But they say that since everybody wants to get along because it is the Hajj and they want to show some type of community sense of community. They highly discourage people from
reporting. Oh no, there are actual Muslim women groups. Okay, they're on the down low, as you will, because they just get slammed. When they speak out against this, going on Hajj, what the hell is this? I mean, well, dude, you ask any woman who goes to Egypt, okay, they take a taxi cab and they're just completely sexually harassed. Okay, especially like a women's group, you know what I mean. Especially got the young college students going over there. I mean, it's just horrendous. Okay, well, what's happening here? And that's because they honestly, well, their view of women is, well, they're just a piece of dirt, that they can plow their field at any time. Anyway, but no, seriously, the thing on Mecca, what I find interesting on the story of Mecca, all the things you brought up, there's no fields, there's no date palms, there's no trees, there's no nothing, right? Okay. Mecca is in what's called a wadi, okay? It is a floodplain, okay? I'm going to send you okay. It's in a flood.
Let me just tell our Slam RN, go ahead and send it. I'll pull it up in my email.
All right. Well, it's a wadi. It's a floodplain. Now, here's the deal with that, okay? There are many floodplains in that area of Arabia, Okay, actually, most of it's a floodplain if you look at it. Okay, well, when you only get like a few centimeters of rain, once a century. If you get an inch of rain, in a 1 day period, you're going to flood. But and they were set up deliberately. What these things were, these Kaabas, there were many Kaabas, many shrines around that part of Arabia, and that actually is documented in one of the Greek historians, okay, that wrote about it. I forget his name.
Ptolemy.
Ptolemy, that's it. Well, it starts with the P, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, but
Ptolemy.
the P is fine.
Ptolemy. But then why put the P in there? That's like Illinois. Illinois, the S is like, why put the S there then? That's like
How about Des Moines? Des Moines. I mean, what?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Why do people? Anyway, point being is this. I think maybe that's a representation of a phlegm or something like that. Anyway, point being is this. So they would put up these wadis because the Arabs at that time, because they didn't have much resources, and I'm surprised. Why would anyone? Let's say you go with Darwinism on migration and stuff like that. We all started in Africa and migrated out and wandered about. Why would you stay in Arabia? Why would you stay there? You're walking through. Keep walking, dude. You know what I mean? Just kind of keep going. But evidently, people did. They like to climb it. Hey, people, whatever. Okay. Anyway, point being is this. These tribes, they would go and raid each other, okay? And they would go and steal their stuff. And it was almost comical. It was almost kind of a childish thing. Normally, nobody would get killed. You would just kind of capture people. It's kind of like capture the flag. It was a game kind of deal. And then they would pay ransom and everybody would get along, blah, 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 whatever. They trade women, whatever. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it was almost a game for the most part, as far as what I can tell in my research that I did years ago. Okay. And then you would have a holy man, a shaman. Okay, if it got too bloody or if it got too big of a deal, he would set up a Kaaba in one of these wadis for a very specific reason. Because these things were not supposed to last. They were not supposed to stand. The whole thing, once they had the powwow, the sit down, okay, or the parlay, if you will, okay, between the various tribes where they worked it out, where they wouldn't go around raiding each other anymore, okay? They would work out their hunting lands or whatever, okay? But they would set this thing up specifically for that purpose, and then once they were done with it, they would move away from it, because it was a floodplain. You don't want to live in a floodplain, right? Okay? Now, my theory is this, going along with, what's his name? Dan, right? Dan, what's his name? The guy you were talking about.
Gibson?
The guy, yeah. Okay, so I agree with his theory that Mecca, when they describe Mecca, they're really describing Petros or whatever, or the Jordanian Valley. Okay, I believe that. I'm a firm believer in that. But here's the deal. This area was well known by the time of the Arab conquest. And the Arab conquest had really nothing to do with Muhammad. If you read the early interactions, okay, with Christians, with the Christian of the Byzantine Empire, and their interaction with the Muslim invading armies, there's no mention of Muhammad. There's no mention of a prophet. Okay? They just want to know what these Christians believe. And these so-called, Nascent Muslims, they had a certain belief because they had interacted with Jews and stuff like that. So they had come up with the concept of a monotheistic God, if you will, at a certain point. So they're still developing this, right? And they didn't have any holy city or holy shrine. And then somewhere down the line of 100 years later or so, came with the idea, hey, I know where my tribe is from. There was this wadi, this Mecca. Why don't we put it there? Because nobody's going to go there. Who would go there? You know what I mean? Okay? So it's out of the way. Nobody's going to question it. Hey, that's a great idea. And I think that's what they did. It was actually designed for that reason, 100 years after the alleged Muhammad, who I believe is multiple people. So, yeah. But anyway, that's
there's a lot of when we look at the history of Muhammad, there's no mention of Muhammad for over 60 years anywhere in the literature, unless you stick, if you follow the standard Islamic narrative, which provides some type of evidence, or that says that he did exist, or that he did live from 570 to 632. There's nothing there. When we look at the first reference to him, I believe, is on a coin that isn't dated until around 690 something. So when you start looking at the evidence for Muhammad, there's more evidence for Muhammad than there is for the city of Mecca. I would grant that, because you have something that says that has a coin there, and then you also have the Dome of the Rock. But other than that, there's nothing. So when we start evaluating all this in its entirety, it's like this entire idea was invented. And Jay Smith does a good job of providing not an excuse, but a possible scenario how Islam was formed. And he talks about how, the conflict between the Umayyad and the Abyssinian dynasties and things of that nature. But the fact is that the evidence for the standard narrative just simply does not. It's just not there. And when you look at what the work that Dan Gibson is doing and has done, where he points out, where you look at the early Islamic Qiblas, the earliest Islamic Qiblas don't point towards Mecca. And if Mecca is supposed to be that city, that mother of all cities, let's see, was it 692? Rob K says the 692 was for the coins, removed images and put the first mention of the Shahada. All right, thank you, Rob. I appreciate that. The first mention of, or what I was going to say is that the first indication that the direction of prayer towards Mecca isn't until the 8th century, almost 100 years after the death of Muhammad. So you have all of these mosques being, you're supposedly having all of these mosques constructed with the Qibla facing Mecca, but it doesn't for the first 100 years. If you look at the Dome of the Rock, if you look at the Al-Alaska Mosque, they don't face, the Qibla does not face Mecca. It faces Petra. So when Dan Gibson makes the argument, and here's the thing, just as soon as you start engaging people on this topic, and this, I'm just going to give you guys warning. If you're going to engage Muslims on, whatever social media platforms or on your podcasts or whatever, here's what they do. When you bring up all of these problems with Mecca being the historical place in the 7th century, when you bring up that it was not there, if you mention Dan Gibson, the whole conversation moves away from them answering questions and trying to present some type of evidence for Mecca to all kinds of arguments against Petra being the place of where they're talking about in the Quran. So I would just recommend just avoid all that nonsense. You don't have to prove that Petra is it. You don't have. I mean, that's like the last thing that you need to do. What they need to prove is that Mecca existed in the 7th century. Yes, you're absolutely right, Protestant. This is Ed Van Halen typing in there, saying that they want to discredit Dan. Yes, they do. And then who's the guy that was he was supposed to be this expert king, Dan King, or something King, something like that, where he was supposed to be the expert on all the Qiblas. And then as soon as Dan started publishing all his books on the Qiblas not pointing towards Mecca, this guy lost his mind. Does anybody have any information? David King, there you go, thank you. It was David King, and he's supposed to have a PhD, and he's supposed to know. And what is Dan Gibson? Dan Gibson is just your everyday average run-of-the-mill archaeologist who's actually been to these locations, over 100 different locations, and has done the digging, has done the work, and determined where the direction of the Qiblas were supposed to be. And they do not face Mecca for 100 years. Okay, does anybody have anything? We might be out of here early today. Last week, and I appreciate Chris Claus. Where'd Chris go? Where was Chris? Chris is like here, and then he's gone. Did he type something over here? Chris, where did you go?
I would like to ask 2 questions.
Me or something. I think it's me.
Okay, John, go ahead.
Okay. First thing, let us say that Mecca is a holy city, as Muhammad said in Quran or Hadith. It's a holy city. It's al-Qura, al-Mudun, all these things. Why we couldn't see any prophet for all prophets from or even the lineage of Ishmael to Muhammad living in Mecca or saying anything about the Kaaba? Um, Nothing. There is nothing said from any prophet that he went to Kaaba or went to Mecca. If it's holy city, all of them, they were living in promised land in Israel, and no one spoke about anything about Mecca. Then this is something strange. Why Moses, when he left Egypt, didn't running after he killed the Egyptian guy there? Why he didn't go to Mecca? He left in Midian. Midian is far from Mecca, about 1,000 kilometers. It's around Jordan. It's the place where Ishmael lives in front of Isaac. From Midian till Iraq, all this area far from Mecca, about 1,000 kilometers. Then we didn't see any prophet saying that Mecca is a holy city. We didn't see that any prophet says that there is a holy building called Kaaba or whatever in Mecca. All speak about the temple in Jerusalem made by David, King David, or King Solomon, his son. This is the first point. The second point, that Kaaba is made. It's known for Arabs that they write everything in their poet. They have when they love a woman or something, they make like big poet, like 1,000 lines, and spoke about their loving woman. Why we don't have any single poet for any Arab speaking about Mecca or Abraham who built Kaaba? We don't have any single point saying that. Although we have many writers, many poems there made by Christians and Jewish in Arabia before Islam, but there is no single poet written says that there is a holy city called Mecca or a holy building called Kaaba. This is something strange. We don't have any evidence, even from the poems written before Islam. These are 2 points. I'm far away from Dan Gibson. I'm far away because when you say Dan Gibson, as you said, all people, no, he is wrong. But think little. There is no evidence from the prophets. There is no evidence from the people living in Arabia who wrote everything in points.
Well, first off, let me make another note here. It's preservation's the note I'm making here. If you look at what are the conditions are necessary in order to preserve documents, for an example, you don't get any better conditions than a dry environment, a dry, hot environment to preserve documents. So when John starts asking, okay, where is the evidence for any Arabs mentioning Mecca? Where is any evidence?
I just would like to tell you something. All Arabs before Muhammad were known that by memorization, all their poets. They don't write. Most of them were illiterate. Same like Muhammad. There is no difference. But they made a lot of good poets. And they called mu'allaqat. They were hang. Mu'allaqat means in Arabic hang over the Kaaba. They write it over Kaaba. But they were memorizing them. Everyone was telling to the other passed to the other. And we didn't collect all these stuff except 100 years after their death. The same like Quran.
Okay, so what you're saying is there's no traditions there. Even when we start looking at, okay, I'm coming at this from a Western perspective, where we say, okay, I would like to see something in writing, and it should be preserved. And they did have some writings at the time, and you're absolutely right at that. Not to the extent that the Western world did, but they're coming from a more of an oral tradition, an oral society. What you're saying is that there's no traditions prior to the 7th century that mention Muhammad or Mecca in any of those.
Nothing.
Completely absent.
And even Abraham, no one said that Abraham was living here. No one said that the Kaaba, this Kaaba, is made by Abraham except Muhammad. If this is something known, historically, then at least I should see it in many writings of pre-Islamic era. Nothing. There is nothing at all.
Yeah, I can say that I was camping out on Mars for the last 200 years, but that's my tradition. So you're going to have to believe me when I say that, right? Is anybody going to believe me when I say that?
I'll believe you, Ed. The one person.
So what you need to have is evidence. You need to have evidence. You can have this oral tradition all day long, but until you have the actual evidence proving it, it won't even go through a court of law, will it?
No, and John touched on something that was very important, because when you start speaking of evidence, you would like to see some type of tradition existing prior to this. If you're supposed to make this all-important Hajj to this city, you would expect to find some type of evidence for that city being mentioned. And he pointed to something that's critically important. When you look at all the prophets, if Abraham was supposed to be lived in Mecca, if Abraham was supposed to have gone to Mecca, you would have some type of mention, you would have some type of tradition, you would have some type of idea that this city is supposed to be important to God. It's supposed to be, I don't want to say venerated, but it's so important that you have to pray towards it 5 times a day. You would expect to find something, but the problem is that it's just like it appears out of nowhere, like some, I don't know, some type of magic trick. Oh, well, look, the city over here that's been here since Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve were actually thrown down over here. This is the actual city that God has always wanted everybody to follow. He wants you to pray there 5 times a day. You're supposed to make a pilgrimage there at least once during your lifetime. That's how important the city is. But nobody mentions that city ever. It's not mentioned anywhere before and during the 7th century. So if it's not mentioned, you would have to think, if it isn't mentioned, you would have to think that it did not exist. Now, there are a couple arguments that they do make for its existence, but if you look at them, they are easily answerable, and they do not hold water when they're critically analyzed. And Rad made a mention to Ptolemy when Ptolemy was talking about a waterway to a city that was in Arabia, but that city was along the Gulf of Aqaba, just straight east of the Gulf of Aqaba, about 90 miles, nowhere near close enough to Mecca, which would be 600 miles, or was it 90 kilometers or 90 miles? Doesn't matter. But it's not even close to what it would need to be in order to be Mecca. So when you start looking at the mentions of it, previous mentions of it, none of them hold any water when you look at them with a critical eye. And then again, if you're going to make demands on the Bible, saying, okay, you have to demonstrate that Jesus Christ lived in the 1st century in order to believe that he's a historical person. Well, then you would have you can look at the New Testament, because there's all kinds of evidence for it. Okay, fine, I get that, but the New Testament is corroborated by other sources, outside sources, the Jewish Talmud,
including the Quran. Hello.
Including the Quran, but I don't consider the Quran to be a reliable source.
I don't know. I don't either, but it's still, Jesus is confirmed, his Torah and his gospel. His gospel is confirmed by the Quran.
The Injil?
Yeah, the Injil.
Yeah.
If they want to start playing word games about Injil, we can go there too. But then they're going to have to produce the Injil, right?
Well, no, they don't. They can just say that it was a book given to Jesus.
Well, they can say all they want to. Then we're going back to the tradition, right?
Right.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So
Double standard. Hello.
yeah, we won't have any of that. I get it. Dominic, I see you're over there in chat. If you wanted to come in and join the chat, you're more than welcome to also. Okay.
Hey, Eric.
Yeah.
Eric.
Is that DL?
That's the silent.
The silent one. Hi. How are you? Good to hear from you.
I'm good. Just wanted to piggyback off of Brother John Isaac. If we were to go to Genesis chapter 28, and we look at the prophets.
Mm-hmm. Let me pull it up for you. Genesis 28. Genesis.
Start at verse 6.
Okay, hold on just a second. There we go. Genesis 28. Hold on. For some reason, my computer, and I thought I had this fixed when I put in all that extra RAM, and evidently it didn't. Okay, so 28. Let me share my screen here. There we go. Genesis 28. What verse? Where are we going?
We're going to start at verse 6. This is right before Jacob's, right before his dream that, the stairway. But anyway, it says Esau, verse 6, Esau noticed that Isaac blessed Jacob and sent him to Padan Aram to get a wife there. When he blessed him, Isaac commanded Jacob, do not marry a Canaanite girl. And Jacob listened to his father and mother and went to Padan Aram. Esau realized that his father Isaac disapproved of the Canaanite women. So Esau went to Ishmael and married, in addition to his other wives, Mahalath, daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son. She was the sister of Nebaioth. Okay, so Esau, wanting to tick his parents off, went and married. When he saw that they didn't like the Canaanite women that he married his uncle Ishmael's daughter. Correct? Which would prove that Ishmael was still alive at this time. Ishmael, according to Islam, went down to Mecca and built the Kaaba with his father. Now, the Kaaba is supposed to be the house of God, right? I forgot the name of it. Bait something.
Baytullah Haram.
Yeah. Okay, so following this incident, we have Jacob in verse 10, who goes down to Beersheba. He reached a certain place and spent the night there because the sun had set. He took one of the stones from the place, put it there at his head, and lay down in that place. And he dreamed a stairway was set on the ground with its top reaching to the sky, and God's angels were ascending and descending on it. I'm gonna skip through this, but anyway, I just want to point out the fact that Ishmael was supposed to have gone with his father Abraham to build the Kaaba. It was the house of God. It was the place of prayer for all nations. Correct?
Correct.
Well, after Jacob has this dream in verse 17, in verse 16 it says, when Jacob awoke from his sleep, he said, surely Yahweh is in this place, and I did not know it. He was afraid and said, what an awesome place this is. This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. Okay, so, and then in verse 22, he says, this stone that I have set up as a marker will be God's house. So this is fascinating, because if Ishmael had just went with his father Abraham not too long ago to build the Kaaba, the so-called house of God and the place of prayer for all nations, then why would Jacob see Bethel, which actually means the house of God, Bethel, the house of God? Why would it be in Palestine? So don't we have two houses of God here? And why was it that Jacob didn't recognize that Mecca was the house of God?
Hold on.
Because the thing is, I know it's got stripling, because I know that with Bethel, I think, is it because that you have Kabat el Malkata? So there's 2 or 3 different sites that are actually for Bethel. The thing is, it's so crazy because I mean, why not? If you look at the distance that Abraham would have to travel, it would be like 3 to 4 days. The thing is, even if that's true, all the references to Mecca are mostly in the actual hadiths, and you only have one outright reference in the Quran, and even that's kind of spurious. So it's like so they're all dated later by the actual Abbasid period. So even if you were to look at the archaeology and say, okay, let's state that Bethel is in Jordan, you have massive problems with the fact of, okay, there's no trade routes to Mecca at that time period, and it doesn't exist on any map. So kind of, what type of hyperbole or kind of flight of fancies do the kind of Muslims think that they're on, kind of with the actual location of Mecca? So yeah,
I'm bringing up.
Yeah, I mean, what I was pointing out is that John Isaac, hit the nail on the head, because we don't have any prophets mentioning Mecca, and you have a problem here because we have Esau, the brother of Jacob, going to Ishmael to marry one of his daughters, showing that Ishmael was still alive. He must have just recently, right before Abraham died, built the Kaaba with his father. But then Jacob recognizes that Bethel is the house of God.
Because the thing is, I mean, if we're looking at it critically, it's only Muslim sources that actually state that they built the Kaaba. There must be other sources dating early on that actually mention, because there's no either Christian or Jewish sources that mention the Kaaba.
Right. Well, I would expect that maybe a later prophet would have corrected Jacob and said, no, this can't be the house of God, because Abraham and Ishmael built the house of God down in Mecca.
Yeah, I think that's what John was. That was what John was alluding to. There's no mention of any other prophet. Go ahead, Ed. I'm sorry.
No, that's no problem. I was just going to say, the one other thing that you need to point out is that there's not one complete Quran manuscript out there. Not one. Not even one.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean? There's no, prior to the printing press, there's no complete manuscript?
Yeah, there's no complete manuscript out there. I've talked extensively with Al-Fadi about that.
I was not aware of that.
Complete.
That's
not one complete. Mm-hmm.
So that's a 700. Printing press was 1453, I think. 7.
Right. 800 years later.
Yeah, you don't have a complete. That's amazing. That's pretty amazing, considering the fact that we have the Vaticanus and Sinaiticus with predate Islam by 3 centuries, for crying out.
We have over 20,000 manuscripts, and if you go and look at the Greek manuscripts alone, 5,000 of them, they're complete. We'll find several complete manuscripts out of all of them. You do not have one complete Quran manuscript, period.
Now, so why do you think that is? Because I would think, you would think that if the Quran is supposed to be that important, you would have, because I thought that the Sana manuscript was complete. That was my understanding.
No,
you're saying that's not complete either.
No, it's not. None of them are. And anybody that tells you that it is, tell them to prove it. Gabriel Sama put out a book about that particular manuscript alone. I bought the book. It was $65. And I went through it, and it's incomplete. That manuscript, there are missing parts in that manuscript all throughout it. So he did go through and even prove where it was based more on the Aramaic. He even calls it the Aramaic language of the Quran?
That's
The Aramaic.
Aramaic, yes, sir. Aramaic. Gabriel Sama is his name.
Because there's quite a few different variations of Aramaic. Which time period and which?
Hold on. Let me just tell you the name of the book. Let me go get
What's
it
his
real
name?
quick.
Gabriel Usama, you said?
No, Gabriel Sama.
Oh.
S-A-W-M-A, I believe. Here it is. Yeah, the Quran misinterpreted, mistranslated, and misread. The Aramaic language of the Quran by Gabriel Sama. S-A-W-M-A.
Okay, let me. Okay, there we go. All right.
And
This
it'll
guy
even
right
show you, and we all know that the early Quran manuscripts didn't have the dots, didn't have all the little dots and squigglies that all made the Arabic language. And if you look at it, you can tell that it was Aramaic, not Arabic.
Yeah, okay, yeah, the diacritical marks. The earliest was supposed to. The earliest ones are supposed to don't have that, but that's because they had not been developed. John might be able to answer this, or you guys might be able to tell me when were these diacritical marks invented? Does anybody know that off the top of your heads?
Yeah, it says it in here. I don't remember right off the top of my head, but it is. I'll look for it real quick.
Mistranslated and was university law, commercial contract, whatever. Okay.
He got into a lot of trouble. The copyright.
Look at how much does this thing cost? Holy crap!
Yeah, it was $65. I paid for it, man. Copyright was 2006.
Wow.
Because the thing is, the book of Daniel is in both Aramaic and and Hebrew, and the thing is that directly comes from the Persian, so that would be like the Sassanid Empire that actually comes from. So there's a direct link because I know that I was trying to prove the early veracity of the book of Daniel because you have the language of the Babylonians is Akkadian, but Aramaic is spoken by people like Darius and other kind of people famous in actual scriptures.
Yeah. Gabriel was a linguist in several different languages, Arabic being, one of his major languages, so he knew it quite well. He knows Aramaic quite well. He teaches this stuff. He's a professor. And let me see here. Oh yeah, he got a lot of Muslims really mad at him over this book because he even shows where verses could written without the diacritical marks could have been interpreted different ways.
What does this manuscript date to roughly? What's the carbon dating on the manuscript?
Let's see, the Sama. Hold on, let me check real quick. I'll get back to you on that.
I'm looking at. Let's see here. Let me bring this up here. Gives you a little 411. Okay, he's a professor in Middle East constitutional law, adjunct professor Middle East studies, expert consultant on international matrimonial law, mainly Islamic and Hindu, taught at Fairleigh Dixon University, New Jersey. Oh, so he's in the United States now.
Yeah, he's been in the U.S. for a while.
Okay, that explains why he's alive.
Yes, sir.
I didn't mean to say that. Yeah, in apostates normally don't have a lot of luck with having their heart
I found the Google version of it. There's a Google Books version of it.
Did you? So we don't have to pay $60.
Yeah, you do.
No.
What do you,
You
think
can
of
only
that?
read. You can only read about so many pages of it.
I know.
I bought the book, man. I bought the book. Bite the bullet. Buy the book.
Well, that's the thing with Dan Gibson's books with the chronic the chronic geography. I can't remember how much these books were, but they weren't, $10 or they're seem like they're 30 and $40. So sometimes if you want to get something that's good, it's a good resource, you just gotta suck it up.
But yeah, man, I mean, this is gold, dude. For $65, the gold that you get is incredible.
What was the name of the book again?
It's called The Quran, Misinterpreted, Mistranslated, and Misread: The Aramaic Language of the Quran by Gabriel Sama.
Quran Misinterpreted.
It's right there, DL. I just put it up in the Quran. The Quran Misinterpreted, Mistranslated, and Misread: The Aramaic Language of the Quran by the Kafir Gabriel Sama. $70. It's even got up. You're gonna have to pay more for it unless you want to buy the $163 version. I don't know if you want to do that.
I tried to find an ebook on it, and there is none. So
Yeah, I already tried that.
Okay, well
that should tell you
that's what I
how
was
much
trying to do.
that should tell you how much flack this guy caught from the Muslim community for publishing this book. He got a lot.
Sure.
Hey, Eric.
Yeah.
Eric, I got one more from the prophets. Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 7 verses 11 and 12.
Okay, Jeremiah. Let me see here. Jeremiah, where's Jeremiah? There he is.
It's in the
What
Bible.
number? Yeah, what chapter? 7?
Chapter 7 verses 11 and 12.
11 and 12. Okay. There you go. Go ahead.
So he says, "Has this house which bears my name become a den of robbers in your view? Yes, I too have seen it. This is the Lord's declaration." So he's talking about the house in Jerusalem. But then the next verse he says, "But return to my place that was at Shiloh, where I made my name dwell at first." So here's another problem. Before the house in Jerusalem, he says Shiloh was the place in which he caused his name to dwell first, not Mecca.
Have you ever looked Scott Stripling's? That's where he's kind of got his dig at Shiloh. I think I've got a friend who's about to dig at Shiloh. So yeah,
is that right?
Yeah, no, they found that's like an altar at Shiloh. I think they found there's more than one site for the tabernacle at Shiloh. From what I've kind of think, there's a whole thing I think on Vimeo called Joshua's Conquest, and he goes into detail of like what's been going on at Shiloh. It's very, very fascinating. So yeah.
Well, I mean, like John Isaac said, this is problematic because none of the prophets are recognizing a house of God in Mecca or Arabia. And so Jeremiah is saying that before his name dwelled in Jerusalem, it dwelled in Shiloh. He didn't say in Mecca.
But because the thing is, they mention Abraham, and that's the thing is Abraham didn't build any houses.
And then when you talk about building, if you go to First Kings and you look at that building project that Solomon had for the temple, I mean the amount of money that it took and the labor, but it was only Abraham and Ishmael that went and built the house, for God.
The thing is,
who funded that thing?
But according to the scriptures, the only thing like in the Torah and stuff like that is the only thing he built was wells. He was forbidden to build because he lived as a nomad. So there's no way that he could do any building if it was No, I'm trying to find actual scripture in the because isn't he actually forbidden by God to actually build? Because the only piece of land that he owns is the field of Machpelah.
Well, then he also bought the cave for to bury Sarah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So the thing is the evidence from the Torah. I think is that I can't remember the tablets. Is it?
Well, I mean, we just have these prophets, and none of them recognize that Mecca is a house of God. They don't even know anything about a city called Mecca.
But the ironic thing is that Abraham didn't do any building. None. Absolutely none. So
Not in Palestine. Not in Palestine.
No, not any at all. It's like I mean, there's no example of him in the scriptures doing any building whatsoever at all, because
some altars that he built,
even Arabs before Islam never say that Abraham came to Mecca or built any building. It's just in Quran.
What historical sources do you have before the Quran? I mean,
all the poets that made by all poets written. They wrote everything about their life. They wrote everything about their families, about their wives, their girlfriends. You can see some names: Imr ul-Qais, Antar ibn Shaddad. All these are great writers or great poems. Wrote a lot of things before Islam. There is no one said that we are children of Abraham who built a holy house or Kaaba in our place. No one said that. And the writings, or it's till now you can search and find. Even Warq ibn Nawfal has his writings.
Hey guys, I'm going to have to run and cut today's show short. I have my grandkids with me this afternoon, and I'm the only one home, and they are in dire need of me. Do you guys have anything else that you wanted to add before we cut on out of here?
I'd just like to definitely say check out Gabriel Sama's book. It's well worth it. The ammunition that it gives you is blindsiding to every Muslim I've ever presented it to.
Yeah, I would just like to add, all you kuffar are going to hell. You should take your shahada like I did and convert to Islam.
Where's your advert, Radical? Have you got your advert?
You know what? I just haven't been feeling funny at all. I've been so depressed, but I'm getting over my depression. So
you know what it is? I know what exactly it is, that you actually have a job now.
That's true too. Yeah, that's true too. But the job is really getting depressing as well. It's all CRT stuff. You have no idea, dude. They had a thing, honestly, of talking about transsexualism. I mean, and how to support them, and it was just really goofy. I was like, yeah, I don't think so. Anyway, Amazon is not for me.
Fly on the wall. Okay, everybody.
I mean, dude, I'm trying to keep my mouth shut, but I'm telling you, I'm going to explode there. I'm going to get fired. You watch. It's going to happen.
Well, you collect unemployment again. That's what everybody else is doing.
No, they're cutting that off, dude, because they figured out that you can't pay people to stay at home.
Well, they need to. They definitely need to. Okay, folks, I'm cutting it short. Again, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate everybody coming and spending your afternoon here with us. I hope that you were informed and you were edified with today's topic. And come back Tuesday at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time for Radio Free Kafiristan. We'll see you all then. God bless.
God bless.
God bless.
God bless.